All right, with all that being said then, we're going to take a deep breath and move into our discussion this morning. With all that stuff going on last week, on top of all that, I've had some heavy things on my own mind lately because I didn't know if you know this, I'm sure you did, that Owen's getting married in a few weeks, which is totally awesome. We're excited about that. But it's making me realize I'm getting old and my kids are growing up. I got Owen moving out actually at the end of this next week. So this coming weekend, we're going to be loading up trailers and moving Owen into his old apartment. So my son becoming an adult, that's hard to wrap my mind around. Claire being engaged, that's hard to wrap my mind around. I'm having a birthday this month, I just realized right now, that makes me feel old. So I got all these things going on in my life, and it's got me thinking about various moments of nostalgia, and I've been looking at pictures. I had my mom send me a whole bunch of family pictures, because I was like, I need to make a family tree. I don't know why, I just felt like I needed to do that. But looking back over pictures, especially as my kids are getting older, it's kind of neat to find baby pictures and things like that. That's Owen right there when I don't know how old he is, a few months old. But I want you to notice something that Owen has in his hand right there. That is a straw, a milkshake straw from Jack in the Box. And on top of that straw is an antenna ball. Because I think it was like Christmas time, they were giving out these little like antlers on the Jack in the Box Jack antenna balls. You don't see antenna balls too much anymore. Cars don't have antennas like that. But we put that on a straw, and that was Owen's favorite toy. Okay? We're poor, okay? No, it was creative. He liked it. But that was his favorite toy for like a few weeks, okay? He carried that around because babies like to grip things, you know, and as they're developing those fine motor skills, having something in your hand that you can hold and move around, you know, is beneficial to childhood development and learning and all of that. But he quickly outgrew that toy, as you would expect. He outgrew the antenna ball. I wish we would have saved it. All we have is a couple pictures of him holding it, and we can reminisce about it. He doesn't remember it, but mom and dad do. So he grew out of that. So as first-time parents, one of the things that we wanted to do, by the time we got to Fiona, we figured it all work out on its own, but we wanted to make sure our kids had the most educational toys, okay? So in the early 2000s, the big thing that all young parents were into was Baby Einstein. I think it turned out it makes kids dumber, I don't know, but Baby Einstein was all the thing. And you'd put on these VHS tapes or these DVDs of somebody pushing a train across the ground and then a light flashing and then checkered patterns. And also, it's supposed to help with cognitive development. Well, we're parents, we want our kid to be the smartest kid in the world, so we got Baby Einstein toys. And these Baby Einstein toys are supposed to help you learn and grow. That's a little mirror. You probably can't make it out. You put on the headrest of your seat so the kid behind you can see the mirror and learn and grow. Baby Einstein are supposed to make your baby smart, like Einstein, okay? But again, you move out of those things. But all the toys that you probably gave your kids was designed to help them to learn and grow. This one actually made me choke up thinking about, so I'm not going to reference that one too much. But we had this little book called Pat the Bunny, and all of our kids would pat the bunny. Some of you are nodding your head because you probably did this with your kids too. And there's a daddy's scratchy beard is in there, and you can rub a piece of sandpaper, and it helps kids learn about textures and how different things work. And you probably gave your kid a toy like this, right? These little stacking rings. I think all of my children had these. These were designed to help them grow and to learn and to see how shapes work and things stack. Toys serve a purpose, right? I shared this picture once years ago in a sermon. I found it again, so I'm throwing it in there. That's me with a stuffed animal that I had named Ted. I'm bringing it up here for a reason. I'll bring it up in a second. But I carried that around with me everywhere for a while. And you give kids stuffed animals because stuffed animals help them learn how to care for something and be gentle and be responsible. Like, don't leave your stuffed animal in an airport or a hotel in Anaheim. You know, something that my sister did that. You know, that kind of thing. You learn from it, you grow. But speaking of that toy right there, last week I got a text from my mom about that toy. She said, hey, did you know that if you had kept Ted, that's what I named him, his name was Ted, it'd be worth $5,000 if it was still in his box? And I don't know if you can see my reply. I said, you let me play with him. It's your fault I missed out on the pound puppy wealth. But I was joking. I know I'm not going to get any wealth from it. But toys are interesting like that, right? Toys help you grow. Toys help you develop. We understand that. Even Wikipedia says playing with toys is considered to be important when it comes to growing up and learning about the world around us. Younger children use toys to discover who they are, to help their bodies grow strong, to learn cause and effect, explore relationships, and practice skills they will need as adults. Basically, toys help the immature grow into maturity. You know, your toys change as you get older because your interests get changed and your abilities change. I remember I went from stuffed animal to, I had this little electric thing. Oh, I don't remember what it was called, but you can hook all these different wires together and make stuff, like make a laser that does this, or make a radio, or make an alarm. You know, you move on from the simple toys to the more complex to, now as an adult we bought a truck. You know, that kind of thing, right? Toys help the immature grow to maturity. With that thought in mind, keep that in your mind. Toys help the immature grow to maturity. I want you to go way back in time to ancient Corinth. You're like, what does that have to do with toys? I'm going to show you here in a second. Go back in your mind to ancient Corinth around the year, let's say 60 AD. That is a recreation from about 100 AD right there on the screen. Open up your Bibles then to 1 Corinthians. If you don't have a Bible, Google 1 Corinthians number 13, okay? We're going to go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and I want us to talk about maturity a little bit and the need for us to grow up. And I don't mean that mean, but all of us can be immature at times, and not in the fun way. Like, this morning, because I'm a morning person and my family's not, so I relish in the fact that I'm loud in the morning and they're not. But I was singing around being immature and making a bunch of goofy songs. That's not the kind of immaturity we're talking about. We're talking about spiritual immaturity. There's a need for all of us to grow from the spiritual immaturity to maturity. There's a time and place for us to put away the toys. And 1 Corinthians chapter 13 talks all about that. And what it's going to show us is that immature people are still caught up in childhood type behaviors, the bad ones, and aren't maturing like they should. And the evidence for Christian maturity. So if you haven't been with me because you're like, this whole toy stuff is boring, here's the point you need to know. Christian maturity is demonstrated by love. That's how you show that you've actually grown up. Okay? The way you actually grow up in the faith is through love. Now let me prove this to you. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, starting in verse 1. Now, a little bit of background here. The church in Corinth was really selfish, and they were fighting a lot. They got so divided that they're even arguing about who baptized who. You got some, in chapter 1 it says, somebody over here says, I was baptized by Paul. And this person says, I was baptized by Ananias. You know, and you got all these people arguing about who's cooler than who because who baptized who. That's pretty bad when you're that selfish that you're arguing about who's the best Christian based upon who baptized them. It got so bad in Corinth that people were getting there early and taking up all the communion and eating it all up so that other people who were arriving late couldn't get any. Okay? That's pretty bad. We haven't had that problem here. We've had selfishness over the years. My kids have snuck in and ate some of the communion. We've never ate all of it, okay? But that's what they were doing. And bad stuff. And then you get into chapter 12, we find out that, yes, these people some of them had spiritual gifts. In the first century, God empowered the church through some supernatural spiritual gifts, gifts like prophecy, gifts like languages or tongue speaking. And they were all arguing about who has the best gift, who's the best Christian, what's number one, and they were all trying to get each other's gifts. They were fighting about who's the best Christian based upon who has what ability, and the whole church is fighting about this, and for some reason they all really wanted the ability to speak in a different tongue or a different language. With that being said, chapter 13, verse 1. So Paul's angry at them. He goes, if I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I have become a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. He goes, guys, you can speak in all sorts of languages, but if you don't love one another, it's like a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal, which, by the way, were the two instruments I was allowed to play in band in high school, the gong and the cymbal, which, random Cliff Sabro fact, I got a message about 10 years ago from Buchanan High School that they found a gong behind a locker with my autograph on it, that I had broke that gong back in the year 1998. So I'm proud of that moment. But it wasn't a malicious breaking. I hit it too hard and it broke and we all autographed it. But so if you don't have love, you become a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. You're pointless. No one wants to hear it. Cymbals only sound good when there's a rest of a band. If you're just banging cymbals up here, no one's impressed. No one likes it, okay? No one goes to a cymbal concert. They don't do that, right? So Paul says, if you are just speaking in all sorts of languages but don't love one another, you're like pointless noise. Then he goes on. He says, if I have the gift of prophecy and know all the mysteries and knowledge and have all faith so as to remove mountains but do not have love, I'm nothing. So he goes, look, you can have all the faith in the world. You can be able to prophesy. You can have all the knowledge of the universe. But if you don't love, you're nothing, he says. Verse 3, and if I give all my possessions to feed the poor, and if I surrender my body to be burned, but I do not have love, it profits me nothing. Paul goes, look, you can brag all day long about, look at all the money I gave away. Or look, I'm willing to die for my faith. He goes, if you don't love people, it's pointless. It's nothing. It profits you nothing. He goes, here's what you need to do. Verse 4. He says, love is patient, love is kind, and is not jealous. Love does not brag and is not arrogant, because they're bragging and they're arrogant there in Corinth. Love does not act unbecomingly. That's what they're doing when you're fighting about who baptized who. It does not seek its own. That's what they're doing in Corinth. It is not provoked. It does not take into account wrong suffered. It does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. So let's break this down where we're at so far. Love is what we strive for. Spiritual gifts are meaningless without love, and mature love looks like this, putting other people first. But let's keep going. He says, love never fails, verse 8. But if there are gifts of prophecy, like a spiritual gift, they'll be done away. If there are tongues or languages, they will cease. If there's knowledge, it will be done away. So you act like, oh, I've been given this special knowledge. It's going to go away too. He says, for we know in part, and we prophesy in part, but when the perfect comes, the partial will be done away. And there's a bunch of debate about what is the perfect there. Is the perfect Jesus? Is the perfect the completed revelation word of God? Or is the perfect love in this situation? We won't even worry about that right now. But then look at verse 11. Okay, verse 11 is where I want us to hang our hat this morning. When I was a child, Paul says, I used to speak like a child, think like a child, reason like a child. When I became a man, I did away with childish things. There's a reason why most of us don't still have our toys. We grew up and we stopped playing with them. They weren't of any value to us anymore. Now as we get older, we wish we would have kept them in their original packaging and you could have all sorts of money, right? But we didn't do that. We played with them and then we disposed of them. You know that whole scene in like Toy Story where Woody's falling in the trash can, right? That kind of thing, right? We get rid of the toys. We move on, Paul says. When I was a child, I used to speak like a child, act like a child. But when I became a man, I did away with childish things. What childish things were the Corinthians doing? Fighting, dividing, being selfish, thinking somebody's better than the other person. Those are all things that little kids do. We expect that with little kids. When they grow out of that, we understand it. It's not good behavior, but it's behavior that we work to correct. Paul says you grow out of that. You grow out of that. He hit me. He started it. It's my turn. It's not fair. That's how children act. But we grow out of that, and we put away the toys. These spiritual gifts, he even says, we're like those toys, but it's time to move past those. He says, verse 12, for now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. I didn't understand this till later in life, but mirrors, the way we have them, is kind of more of a modern invention, okay? Ancient mirrors would be like a polished piece of metal that they don't reflect as good as the mirror in your bathroom does. So you kind of see dimly what the image is, but one day you'll see face to face. You don't fully get it when you're young, but you'll get it when you're older, is kind of what he's saying. Now I know in part, but then I will know fully, just as I have been fully known. Paul is saying, look, it's time to grow up, and it's time to start playing with toys. Stop playing with toys. It's time to be mature. And how can we be mature, Paul? How can we grow up in the faith? He's going to tell them in verse 13. He says, now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. Now, we normally look at this passage and talk about romantic love, and I'll probably work it into Owen and Janelle's wedding sermon in some way, things like that. But in its most immediate context, this is about brethren getting along and growing up. It's about not thinking about yourself. It's about putting other people first. It's about adults needing to act mature. Because if you're not loving, you are still immature. It's like you're a grown man playing with toys, and that's creepy, okay, right? You don't do that. You grow past that. And here he says, but faith, hope, and love abide. The greatest of these is love. So yeah, in their most basic sense, toys help the immature grow to maturity. You know, as a kid, by the way, that little thing right there that you get in the doctor's office where you move the beads all over the track was my favorite thing. But now that I have kids, that is the most disgusting thing in the world. Do you know how many kids touch that? Okay, just randomly. Keep that in your mind next time you go to the doctor and they have one of those. But toys help the immature grow to maturity. The question for us is, are we mature? Are we real grown-ups in the faith? Or are we immature? Well, what does it look like? Quick comparison, and then the lesson is yours. Maturity in the faith is selflessly serving other people. That's what it means to be a grown-up in the church. But the immature side is selfishly expecting to be served. If you're always asking, what is in it for me? Then you haven't grown up yet. That's what kids ask. What's in it for me? Have you ever been around a kid that threw a fit because it wasn't their birthday party? Where's their toy, right? And then you go to that one kid's parents' house and the mom gives every kid a present. You're like, I like this one, right? But no, that's selfish. That's immature to always be expecting to be served. A mature person serves other people. Number two, what is maturity? Maturity is humility and meekness. I'm not so great. I'm not so perfect. I need help just like everyone else. The immature person has ego, has pride, has arrogance that my dad can beat up your dad. I'm the bestest in the world kind of attitude. That's immature. Number three, maturity is gladly allowing others to have greater gifts. Immaturity is wanting what's best for yourself. That's what was happening in Corinth. They were upset that other people had different gifts. Instead of celebrating the other people, they're bitter about it. Why can't I have what they have? I want that. That's not fair. Veruca Salt, Willy Wonka, I want it now kind of attitude. That's immature. A mature person is patient when wronged and kind when hurt. But an immature person is always angry, wrathful, and thinking about ways to get back at somebody. You know, if you ever hang around a preschool and a kid runs up and says, Jimmy hit me. Jimmy, why'd you? Well, he hit me first. That's how children act. But we're adults. We're supposed to grow up in the faith. We're supposed to be mature. And we do that by showing love. So let's ask the question then. Are you still playing with toys? Now, there's nothing wrong with collecting toys. Danny Andreas has a bunch of Hot Wheels, and it's pretty cool, okay? But in a metaphorical sense, are you still playing with toys? Have you grown up yet? See, loving others, serving others, and putting others first is the truest sign of spiritual maturity. Everything else will fail. It'll go to the garage sale. It'll pass away. It'll wear out. You'll lose it someday and not care about it anymore. But verse 13, by faith, hope, and love abide. The greatest of these is love. And verse 8, love never fails. Loving others, serving others, putting others first is how you grow up in the faith, and that will never fail you. The lesson is yours this morning. Let's be a group of people that bless God and bless others by loving others. Let's put away those childish things. Let's grow up in the faith. Let's be mature believers. Greg's going to get up here in just a moment and lead us in a song. If there's any way I can help you, let it be known as together we stand and as we sing.